dear friends and Conrad. I'm very happy to be here, invited by the Socialist Youth Union of Sri Lanka to participate in this important event on the occasion of the 52nd anniversary of the assassination of Che Guevara in Bolivia, and also to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Che Guevara visit to Sri Lanka. I think this is a very important day this year, particularly because the 60th anniversary. Dear friends, today, 52 years after Che Guevara being assassinated, he is not simply a symbol of the 20th century. He is the writer who left anecdotes of his travels and experiences in Latin America and the world. He is the economist, the politician, the Marxist, the son, the father, and friend. He is the man who is remembered for his ideas and his convictions and his internationalism. The man to whom his followers have dedicated countless songs and poems. Today we were received with one of them. On October 18, 1967, the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, said, as you know, between Che Guevara and Fidel Castro was a very special and strong friendship. Despite what the imperialists said, it's not really, they were real friends. He said, he left us his revolutionary thinking, he left us his revolutionary virtues, and he left us his character, his will, his tenacity, his spirit of work. In a word, he left us his example, and the example of Che should be a model for our people. The example of Che should be the ideal model for our people. If we want to express how we want to be our revolutionary combatants, our militants, our men, we must say without hesitation of any kind, let them be like Che. If we want to express how we want the men of future generations to be, we must say, let them be like Che. If we want to say how we want our children to be educated, we must say without hesitation, we want them to be educated in the spirit of Che. If we want a model of man, a model of that does not belong to this time, a model of man that belongs to the future, from the heart, I say that this model, without a single stain in his behavior, without a single stain in his attitude, without a single stain on his performance, that model is Che. If we want to express how we want our children to be, we must say with the whole heart of vehement revolutionaries, we want them to be like Che. Conrad, we can affirm today that Che ideas and examples are found today in all achievement made by the Cuban Revolution. Also, his ideas is present in our fight against the blockade. He helped us to be brave and to resist the blockade. I would like to mention some achievement of the Cuban Revolution. Of course, you can also see in the banner if you a group of them. For example, in Cuba, the basic achievements of the revolution, such as health and education, are guaranteed. These two sectors, together with social assistance, represent 51% of the total state budget in 2019. 53% of parliament members are women. We are the second highest number in the world. Infant mortality rate is 4 for second consecutive year. We have is 4 per 1,000 live births, lowest than the United States. 31,000 students from 103 countries trained by Cuba's Latin America School of Medicine since 1998. 30% forest cover compared with what we've had in 1959, that was only 11%. 400,000 Cuban medical professionals have worked in 165 countries since 1960. You know that this is one of the, now that Americans, the government of America are fighting and try to discredit our solidarity with other countries in medicines, informing and creating liars, many liars, arguments against our cooperation with our friends' countries. 11 preventable diseases were eradicated throughout vaccination programs. This is a letter also you can find in the banner. We should stress that all this was accomplished. We're facing the cruel policy of the blockade imposed by the United States government against Cuba, the longest in recent history. From April 2018 to March 2019, the blockade has caused losses for Cuba of around 4,343 million US dollars. The blockade is a massive, flagrant, and systematic violation of the human rights of all Cubans. It constitutes the main obstacle to the development of the Cuban economy and the achievement of the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals. Our country has continued facing the stepping up of this policy, heightened by the decision of the U.S. government to allow, under Title III of the Helms-Burton Act, the possibility of taking legal action in U.S. courts against entities dealing commercially with properties legally nationalized in Cuba during the 1960 years. The Helms-Burton Act provides for aggressive economic actions that constitute an affront to the sovereignty of Cuba and of other countries also, with the purpose of stifling the Cuban economy and increasing shortages suffered by the population. Its regulations contravene international law, the principles enriched in the United Nations Charter, and the rules and regulations established by the World Trade Organization. In addition, United States has implemented another set of significant coercive measures aimed at depriving the Cuban people of its main sources of income, including extreme actions such as the surveillance and the imposition of sanctions against companies, shipping companies transporting fuel to Cuba. As a result of that, we have faced severe difficulties to guarantee the supply of fuel required for the daily activity of the country, which forced us to adopt temporary emergency measures only possible in an organized country with a united and supportive people willing to defend themselves of foreign aggressions and to preserve the social justice achieved. The economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the government of the United States of America against Cuba for nearly 6 decades is the most unfair, severe, and prolonged system of unilateral sanctions ever applied against any country. In this past year, tightening the blockade has continued to be the central pivot of the United States government policy towards Cuba, with ever more notable effects in its extraterritorial application. The U.S. Department of State has on 3 occasions expanded the restricted list of Cuban entities and sub-entities object of additional sanctions to taxes due to the blockade regulation. This measure has caused considerable damages to the country's economy because of its effect of intimidating the international business community. All of these actions were made by the deliberate and declared objective of causing economic harm and depriving Cuba of financial resources. The behavior of the current United States government is an insult to the international community, which for 27 consecutive years condemned the blockade against Cuba within the framework of the the Nations. It ignores successive revolutions by resolutions by the United Nations General Assembly and the declaration of the head of a state or government of the European Union, Latin American, and the Caribbean, the African Union, the Community of Latin American and the Caribbean, CELAC, the Group of 77 plus China, and the Not Alive movement, among other organizations that have demanded an end to the blockade of Cuba. The United States must, without any condition whatsoever, put an end to the unfair blockade which for nearly 60 years has been causing suffering for the Cuban people. Cuba shall not renounce its principle, nor shall it cease in its claim for the complete elimination of the blockade. Therefore, on 6 and 7 of November of 2019, the government of Cuba shall once again present to the United Nations General Assembly the draft resolution entitled Necessity of Ending the Economic, Commercial, and Financial Blockade Imposed by the Government of the United States of America against Cuba. Cuba reiterates its permanent thanks to the international community for demanding the end of this illegal, genocidal, and extraterritorial policy. Thank you also today, once again, to the Socialist Youth Union of Sri Lanka for your declaration. We highly appreciate your solidarity. This year, okay, Conrad, I also want to say that this year is very special because diplomatic relations between Cuba and Sri Lanka arrived to the 60th anniversary. It was 29th of June, 1959. Cuba and Sri Lanka established diplomatic relations, the first of the Asian to recognize the Cuban Revolution. Also, this year we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Che's historic visit to Sri Lanka in August, a few days later, in August 1959. You know that this wonderful tree was planted by Che on 8th of August 1958. Really, we celebrate this day in a very special context. Cuban people, of course, are proud of country with Sri Lankan solidarity and friendship since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. Thank you very much.